Hello, and welcome to Average Guitar for my cats. Hello, and welcome to Average Guitar for Average People. Today's lesson is going to be on open chords. Open chords are found in all walks of music, no matter how complicated, no matter how simple. We're going to focus on a chord progression first, a simple 4-chord thing that you can kind of play over pretty much anything, and then we're going to expand from there alphabetically, from A all the way up to G, the last letter of the musical alphabet. So, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you have a guitar, put it in your hands. If you don't, then just try to remember everything you see because, what else are you going to do? So, let's go. All right, welcome to the first chord in a series of about 9 of them, I think. Maybe there's more? No, just 9. So, we're going to go ahead and get started by placing our middle finger here, finger number 2, on the 3rd fret of the low E string. So your first dot here, you're going to take your middle finger and you're going to plant it as close to the metal bar as you can without being on top of it. And we're going to just gently press that for now. Then we're going to take our first finger here and we're going to file it in behind on the 2nd fret of the A string. We're going to try and keep our hand at a bit of an angle so we can get a good attack angle on this thing. As I said in my basics video, you want to be direct with these. Is to take 2 interior strings here and just leave them open. So we're taking the D and G strings and we're just going to let them ring open. Our 3rd finger is going to plant itself here on the 3rd fret of the B string. Same kind of idea. You want to be close to the metal bar without being on top of it. And then our pinky finger is going to go in here on the 3rd fret of the high A. High E, not high A, jeez. So once you're there, thumb, like I mentioned in the basics video, try to keep it flat on the back. It might have a bit of a curve to it. That's okay. Don't get too concerned about it. It can also be a little bit higher or a little bit lower depending on your hand. Everybody's hands are built a little bit differently. I won't go into as much of a rant on each one of these chords, so just keep all this stuff in mind and you should be fine on each chord. So once you're placed down, press harder than you think you might need to. The movement you're looking for here is more of a pinch than a squeeze. You don't want to close your hand. You want to pinch the neck in between your thumb and your fingers, sort of like this, I guess. Imagine you're a crab. So once you're there, your next goal is to strum it and see how it sounds. So that should be what you hear. Not too complicated, right? So once you've got that part down, you can move on to the next chord. Oh, quick note, this one is all 6 strings. Not all of these chords are all 6 strings, but you do want every single one of these to ring out from bottom to top. And if you do what I just did and you arpeggiate the chord, you play it one note at a time, you want to make sure that they are all ringing clearly and you don't let go of one of the notes on the way through. You don't want to do something like that. That's bad. Don't do that. It builds really bad habits and then you can't play the chord, but you can surely play every single individual note. So on to the next one. Again, we're doing a chord progression. So the first one is G. Next one is D. D is a cramped chord, but it shouldn't give you too much trouble if you take your time with it. We're starting with the open D string, and then we're going to plant our first finger on the 2nd fret of the G string, so right in there. Middle finger, 2nd fret, high E, again maintaining a close proximity to our 2nd fret there, the actual metal bar. And then our 3rd finger's got to plant itself just inside here. The lower your thumb is, the better your wrist angle can be. You want to kind of tilt it forward so you can get a nice direct shot on it. Once you've got that down, same deal. You're going to strum through it gently to verify that you have all of the parts where they need to be. And then you can go ahead and strum it a little bit harder. And that's our D. So as we move forward, we're going to go into the E. E is probably the easiest chord that you are going to play by a pretty wide margin. I think most people don't have any problems at all with this one, with the rare exception. So if you do, don't feel too bad, but just understand that it's, it is what it is. So this one's all 6 strings again. We're going to start with the low open E, and then we're going to plant our first 2 fingers. So our first finger is going to go here. Our first finger goes in the 2nd fret of the A string. Our 2nd finger goes in the 2nd fret of the D string, right there. And then we're going to strum all 6 strings, nice and slow. And we have a sound that sounds a little bit like that. Not too bad, right? So that's 3 chords down, 1 chord to go for this particular chord progression. The last chord in this progression, before we just kind of go into a shotgun approach for the rest of them, is C. C can give people a lot of trouble. So if you have problems with this one, don't feel bad. It just is a complicated series of motions to go through at first. So you're going to take your ring finger to start, finger number 3, and we're going to plant it right here in the 3rd fret of the A string. Then our middle finger, finger number 2, is going to come right here on the 2nd fret of the D string. We're going to have an open G, and then our first finger is going to come in right here on the 1st fret of the B string. If you haven't already figured out what can go wrong here, I'll give you a quick hint. Your fingers can touch a lot of strings they're not supposed to touch. It's very easy to get a bunch of dead notes like that kind of thing. So that's my 3rd finger laying down too far and clipping on my middle finger string. So to fix that, just increase that angle of attack again. Push your wrist forward and bring your thumb down so that your fingers can have a direct line of sight to the fretboard. And then do the same thing we did for the rest of the chords. Strum through it nice and slow, and then go a little bit harder on the last one. So just a quick recap on that chord. Ring finger, 3rd fret, middle finger, 2nd fret, D string, open G, 1st finger, 1st fret, B string, and then an open E on the top. So we have something that sounds a little like this. All in all, not too bad, but if it gives you some trouble, don't feel bad. So for all 4 chords, we have G, D, E, and C. Mind your thumb positioning at first. It's one of those situations where after you know the rules, you can break them more effectively, but you don't want to start breaking them just yet because you got to get used to them. So one more thing before we move on to the rest of the chords. You're going to want to make sure that you are keeping in mind that sometimes chords will share fingers. So in this case, for G to D, our ring finger doesn't have to move. These are anchor points. This means you can transition to another chord without having to worry as much about where your hand is going. You're not trying to leave the fretboard entirely. You just want to make it simple. So we have G to D. See there? Ring finger stays in put. Stays put. Then we're going to take our first 2 fingers here to move to E. It's going to drop up like that. Done. And then the middle finger can stay for the C. And bam. Done. Nice and simple. Nothing too complicated about that. So now we are on to the rest of the chords. So the rest of the open chords are fairly straightforward. I'm going to kind of move through them at a pretty healthy pace. I'm going to go alphabetically. I'm going to go back over the chords that I just went over to just quickly, just to keep them in the same order. There will be one out of place chord in here. It's called the B7. I have a separate video coming for open 7th chords. They're just modifications of the chords that I'm going to show in this video for the most part, with a few that are kind of their own thing. The reason the B7 is in this video is because it's open chords, and B doesn't really have any open chords other than this one. You can play a few of them, but they're weird suspended things that I don't want to get into right this moment. So I'll show you this one. You can kind of plug it in wherever you want. After you go through all these chords, play them in any order that you feel comfortable, because to be perfectly honest, the only way you're going to get better at guitar is by experimenting. And you should try all of these chords with each other to see what you like the sound of. There are things that do guaranteed sound better together, but you never know what you're going to find. Half the best music you've ever heard was done entirely on accident, and I'd be willing to bet good money on that. So experiment, try some stuff out and see what you like. So start with the A. The A string, we're going to go from the open A string down to the open E string. So we're going to start with our first finger, 2nd fret, D string, middle finger, 2nd fret, G string, and 3rd finger, 2nd fret, B string. Bit of a cramped chord. We're going to go from the A string here all the way down through. From A, we're going to go to A minor. Small modification, but we have to do a complete rearranging of the fingers. So our middle finger is going to go to the 2nd fret of the D string here. Our ring finger is going to go to the 2nd fret of the G string, and our first finger is going to tuck in here on the 1st fret of the B. And then we're going to strum again from the A string all the way down through, and we have an A minor. Next chord is B7. We're going to go through from the A string all the way down to the E string again. with a bit of a weird combination of fingers going on here. So we're going to start with our middle finger, 2nd fret A string. Our first finger is going to go 1st fret D string. Our ring finger is going to tuck in here on the 2nd fret of the G string, right there. We're going to skip the B in favor of letting it ring open. And then our pinky finger is going to tuck in on the 2nd fret of the high E. So then we're left with something that looks a little bit like this. And then it sounds a little like this. Same deal. You want to strum through gently and then a bit more forcefully so you can hear how your chord sounds. You always want to pick out any potentially dead notes before you move forward. Another quick review for the C. So our ring finger, again, 3rd fret, A string. Middle finger, 2nd fret, D string. Open G string, we're going to let that ring by itself. And then our first finger tucks in here on the 1st fret of the B string. And then we're going to strum through again from the A string here down. And that's it. On to the D, again, another review chord. So again, open D string. First finger, 2nd fret, G. Middle finger, 2nd fret, high E. Ring finger, 3rd fret, B. And yet again, strum through nice and slow. And then more aggressively to make sure you got it right. From here we go to the D minor. Not a big difference from the D, only one fret actually changes, but the sound totally changes. So we have the open D string again. Middle finger will be on the 3rd fret, 2nd fret of the G string this time around. Ring finger will be on the 3rd fret of the B, and our first finger will be on the 1st fret of the high E. And that gives us our D minor. From there we have an E major. E major is just like E with one extra note, so it's not too bad to deal with. So we have all 6 strings this time. Our middle finger is going to kick us off with the 2nd fret of the A string. Our ring finger will kick us off with the 2nd fret of the D. And our first finger will tuck in here on the 1st fret of the G. So we end up with a shape that looks a little like this. And we strum all 6 strings, again, slowly first. And then a little faster. Just to make sure that you got everything where it needs to be and all your notes are ringing out how you want them to. From here we can shift to an easy version of the E. Before I had you use your first 2 fingers. We're going to use a different version this time because sometimes you need to change it up a little bit. We're going to go from the E major here and just lift the first finger. And bam, we have an E minor. Really simple change. Most of these chords, like I said before, aren't that different from each other, so you can kind of keep things simple. The next chord in this list is F. This, while technically not an open chord, I wanted to include it because it's very commonly used and it's usually taught alongside the open chords anyway, just kind of like the B7. So this one's a little trickier. You're going to take your first finger. I'm going to go backwards this time. And you're going to bar gently with the tip of your finger, well, firmly with the tip of your finger on the first 2 frets, the first fret of the skinniest 2 strings, your B and your E. So you're going to do that. Then your middle finger is going to tuck in here on the 2nd fret of the G, and your 3rd finger will go here on the 3rd fret of the D string. This chord can be really tough, so you're shooting for this kind of sound. Don't be surprised if you hear more like this, because again, it's hard to press appropriately hard with your first finger. Thumb positioning is everything for this one. You want to try to keep in between your ring finger and your first finger so you can distribute that force better. It's like snowshoes. You want to make sure that you have everything spread nice and even so no one finger is working too hard. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and play the G again because, well, it's the last of the open chords that you can play without having to do some weird contortions. So our middle finger, back to the 3rd fret of the low E. Our first finger, 2nd fret of the A string, open D, open G. 3rd finger goes to the 3rd fret of the B string, and our pinky finger goes to the 3rd fret of the high E. And then you just strum. Bada bing, bada boom. The right-hand portion of this video will be right after this in terms of what I need you to try to do while you're playing these chords. It's not too complicated, but you know, we'll see how that works out. All right, so this portion is going to be fairly brief because I've already covered this part in the basics video. But there's only a couple things that I need you to do. Put your pick in such a way that you've got it in a good spot. So you've got a nice good grip on your pick, not too tight, not too loose. Again, that Goldilocks zone. And then when you're strumming through these things, you want to make sure that you're taking care to be slow and gentle about it. So let's take the G, for example. I have the G fretted up here on the left-hand side where you can't see. And then you're going to take your pick, and you're going to and strum through gently. You'll notice how I went further than the strings actually are. You don't want to just stop cold after this one. You want some follow-through. Like in golf or in baseball, when you swing a club or a bat, you want to make sure that you are moving through the object, not just stopping when you get to it, because that distributes a lot of force in the wrong way. So when you're strumming, it's the same kind of deal. You want to keep things nice and easy and nice and relaxed. And if you stop abruptly, there's no relaxation there. That is patently aggressive in terms of how you're approaching the guitar. So when you are strumming slowly, this is what you want to do. Kind of fall through the strings. Nothing too hideous, nothing too crazy. And then when you want to strum a little more aggressively, you can start a little higher and then move through. Notice how there is some forearm involvement, but for the most part, the majority of the movement is coming from my wrist. You want your wrist to do most of the movement. Your arm will move, especially while you're strumming, but you want a lot of that to come from the wrist. Hopefully that all makes sense. I'll put all of the chord charts up above the chords, and I will link in the description a place where you can download the tab that I used for this, so you can get a better idea of what it looks like on tab and what the chord charts themselves look like at the top of a piece of tab paper. Any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will get back to them as soon as I see them, because, you know, why not? And if you have any other requests for things you'd like to see, tell me. I am going to be moving through my plans of moving on to the open 7th chords and then bar chords after this. And then once I get through all that fun stuff, I'm going to start doing songs, because that is what I want to do, and it sounds like it'll be fun. So stick around, subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next video.